myself, tomorrow will be different. Then one morning, Daniel strode out the door, suitcase ready by his side, leaving the familiar message. I have to leave for a last-minute business trip. 3 days, okay? Love you. I gave him only a faint smile, answering with a brief kiss on his cheek. When the door closed, only Jacob and I remained in the house. Lily had been sent to her grandmother's for the weekend. I looked at Jacob, distractedly scrolling on his phone, and suddenly blurted out, "Jacob, do you want to go camping with me up in the mountains, just the two of us?" Jacob looked up, surprise mixed with curiosity in his eyes. For the first time in a long while, I saw a small spark there. Not a bright blaze, but a little flicker of interest. "Really, Mom?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "Really? We've been promising this for a while now, haven't we?" I smiled softly. Maybe even I hadn't expected myself to say that. But in that moment, something inside me stirred. I couldn't keep being silent like this forever. If I didn't start pulling my son closer now, one day, that distance would become permanent. That afternoon, I hurried to pack the tent, food, sleeping bags, hiking gear, and off we went. On the winding road up the mountain, I glanced over at Jacob, realizing he was now nearly as tall as I was. "We'll be okay," I told myself. "We just need to begin." What I didn't know was that this trip would turn out to be more than just a camping getaway. It would be a turning point, a place where my son and I would touch the long, silent cracks, where the things never said would finally be heard. Night was falling as my son and I arrived at the campsite by the mountain. A cool breeze rustled through the pine trees, the sound of the leaves soothing my heart a little. Jacob fumbled with setting up the tent, glancing over at me every now and then as if to ask, "Are you sure about this, Mom?" "Let me help," I said, bending down to pull on one of the tent ropes. Jacob chuckled, his 14-year-old voice tinged with both mischief and a trace of maturity. "Are you sure you know what you're doing, Mom?" I laughed back, and a strange feeling welled up inside me, part pride, part sadness. My son had really grown up. He was at that age where he was starting to separate from me, to build his own world. Once everything was set up, the two of us sat by the small campfire, roasting bread and sausages. Overhead, the night sky stretched wide, a glittering carpet of stars. Jacob quietly stared upward, his eyes deeper than his years. I glanced at him, wanting to ask, "What are you thinking about?" But I stayed silent. Suddenly, Jacob spoke. "Were you happy?" The question made me freeze, the skewer I was holding suspended midair. My heart tightened. "What, sweetheart?" I forced a smile, hoping to dodge the moment. Jacob didn't look at me, still gazing at the sky. "I mean, are you happy? With Dad, with our family, with everything?" I swallowed hard. Wasn't that the very question I'd been asking myself every night? I don't know, honey," I whispered. "What about you?" Jacob was silent for a long time. Then he let out a sigh far older than his years. "I think sometimes I can tell you're sad, but you never say anything." His words pierced right through the wall I had thought I'd built so securely. I turned, ready to deny it, but Jacob was already looking straight at me, his eyes unusually serious. "I know you're sad when Dad's gone all the time. I know you're sad when I hide away in my room, but you never say anything, Mom. You just stay silent." I couldn't hold it in. I drew a deep breath, my hands tightening slightly. In that moment, all the loneliness, all the bottled up heartache I had buried inside suddenly surged up like a wave. "Jacob," I whispered, my voice catching. Sorry, I didn't know how to say it out loud." Jacob slowly scooted closer, his slender shoulder lightly leaning against mine. "I'm sorry too, Mom. I thought you were okay. But it turns out you're like me, you're lonely too." I let out a soft laugh through my tears, wrapping my arms around Jacob. "Sweetheart, I was worried about not being close to you, Daniel, and the family, and trying to hold everything together. I sometimes forgot myself." We sat together. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and our gentle sighs. "Mom," Jacob murmured softly, "let's promise each other something, okay? From now on, you and I will tell each other the truth. No more staying silent, no more enduring it alone." I nodded, hugging my son tighter. "Yes, I promise." In the quiet of the night, for the first time in so long, I felt something gently healing within me. Not through grand gestures, but simply through the warmth of reconnecting genuinely with each other. After that quiet moment by the campfire, Jacob and I put out the glowing embers and crawled into the tent. Outside, the wind whispered through the treetops, occasionally stirring the rustling leaves, and the soft chirping of insects filled the air. In the darkness, only the small beam of a flashlight cast faint glimmers onto the tent ceiling. Jacob lay beside me, his hands folded behind his head. He stayed silent for a long time, then let out a quiet sigh. Mom, have you ever thought about what you wanted? Turned toward him, hearing that still slightly childlike voice, and my heart softened. And what I wanted, and I mean, what you dreamed of, Jacob answered softly. When you were my age, did you ever think about who you wanted to be when you grew up? Did you think you'd be happy? The question left me speechless. I recalled my youthful dreams of becoming an artist, traveling, writing. Eventually, I chose family and stability, setting other dreams aside. I let out a breath. I wanted many things back then, but as I grew up, I thought I had to choose a peaceful life. Jacob turned to look at me, his dark eyes shining. Do you regret it? My throat tightened. I don't regret having you and Lily, but I think I've kind of forgotten myself, I whispered. There were times I forgot I'm a person too, someone who also needs to be loved, to be heard. Jacob said nothing more, only quietly reached out to hold my hand in the dark. You know, Mom, his voice grew softer. I feel lost too. At school, at home with Dad, I always try to be strong, but sometimes I just wish someone would ask Jacob, are you okay? My heart clenched. I gently squeezed my son's hand, feeling as if both of us were finally in sync, sharing the quiet sadness neither of us had dared to speak out loud for so long. Jacob, I'm sorry, I whispered. I've been so busy enduring everything that I forgot you needed me to listen to. But from now on, I promise I won't leave you alone anymore. Jacob leaned his head on my shoulder, wrapping his arms tightly around me. Me too, Mom. I'll be here. I don't want you to be sad anymore. I felt wrapped in warmth, not grand or dramatic, but simply the sincere bond of understanding between mother and son. We lay quietly in the tent, listening to the wind outside, letting time slow down. I suddenly realized some wounds don't need anyone outside to heal. Some cracks only need a hand to hold. An honest gaze, a heartfelt promise. You and I won't be lonely anymore. That night, I had the first peaceful sleep I'd had in years, holding Jacob close, as if cradling the part of my heart I had once lost. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the tent fabric, bathing the space in a soft golden hue. I opened my eyes and looked beside me. Jacob was still fast asleep, his brown hair falling messily over his forehead, his breathing steady and calm. A pang of tenderness stirred in my heart. How long had it been since I'd truly looked at my son like this? How long since I'd realized he had grown, that he was sensitive enough to notice his mother's exhaustion, sadness, and quietly stayed by her side? Gently slipping out of the tent, I stepped outside. The morning air was fresh, filled with the scent of damp grass and birdsong. I sat down on the folding chair, clasped my hands together, let my body relax, letting myself truly feel after so many months spent racing after responsibility. A little while later, Jacob poked his head out, rubbing his eyes, smiling shyly. Mom, have you been up long? I smiled, opened my arms, and he ran over to hug me. It was a surprise hug, a bit clumsy, but so warm. Jacob, I whispered, burying my face in his hair. Thank you for being here with me. Jacob looked up, his eyes clear and bright. You know, Mom, I need you too. I don't want you to always be sad, okay? I gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, my heart swelling. Yes, sweetheart, and I promise I'll learn to smile more, for both you and me. We prepared a simple breakfast together, toasted bread, eggs, and some fruit we'd brought along. In that small moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in my family for a long time, a real connection. Not shallow conversations, not asking out of obligation, but genuine presence. After breakfast, Jacob grabbed my hand, tugging me toward the grassy field by the lake. Mom, let's play a guessing game. And I laughed. All right, I'm ready. Laughter echoed across the meadow, the sound of feet chasing each other across the soft earth, the calls of Mom and Jacob ringing under the blue sky. A part of me, the part that had grown weary, the part that thought it was already old, gradually melted away, making room for liveliness. By the afternoon, as we sat together on a large rock watching the sunset, Jacob gently asked, Mom, do you think Dad sometimes feels disconnected too, but just doesn't know how to express it? I froze for a moment, my heart twinging. Daniel, the husband who had drifted away, buried himself in work, lost the rhythm we once shared. Maybe, I whispered. Everyone has their own empty spaces inside Jacob, but not everyone knows how to speak about them. Jacob rested his head on my shoulder. I think you're braver than Dad. You spoke up. I smiled softly, feeling a tear slip down my cheek, unsure if it was from sadness or relief. Thank you, sweetheart, I whispered. In that moment, I realized whether Daniel came back to us or not, whether this family stayed whole or not, Jacob and I had found a new bond. Something sacred, something I would never, ever lose again. That evening, after Jacob had fallen asleep in the tent, I sat alone on a wooden bench, a thin blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The night sky cast a faint glow, sprinkled with stars, a scene so beautiful it left me breathless. I closed my eyes, listening to the sound of the wind rustling through the treetops, the soft lap of waves against the rocky shore. It had been so long since I felt truly alone, yet not lonely. Back home, Daniel's absence always weighed heavily. It was like a constant reminder of a distance neither of us was willing to speak about. But here, surrounded by nature, I felt something gentler, as if life itself was whispering to me, Rachel, let yourself breathe. I tucked myself deeper into the blanket, smiling as I listened to the faint chirping of insects. A part of me began to remember feelings long buried. The feeling of being seen by someone, listened to, loved. Not for being a mother, a wife, or the dependable woman, but simply for being me. A small surprise came when my phone vibrated softly in my jacket pocket. A message from Daniel. Rachel, I finished work earlier than expected. I'll drive up tomorrow to pick you and Jacob up, okay? I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Daniel, who for so long had only sent short, work-focused, distant messages, was now choosing to come to me? And I wasn't sure what I was feeling, anxiety, hope, or simply the fear of facing reality again. But one thing I knew for certain, this trip, this private time with Jacob, had changed me. When I slipped back into the tent, I quietly sat beside Jacob, watching my son's face as he slept. A tear rolled down my cheek, not from sadness, but because I felt full again. Not because of anyone else, but because of the connection between mother and son. I whispered into the darkness, Sweetheart, whatever happens tomorrow, I promise I won't abandon myself anymore. Early the next morning, Daniel appeared in the parking lot with a slightly awkward smile. I stepped out, taking a deep breath. Jacob ran up to hug his dad, his bright laughter ringing out, easing some of the tension. Daniel walked toward me. I'm sorry, I've missed a lot. I realize I need to make things right. And I look at him, the man I had once loved, with whom I had shared so many years. And I smiled. Not the familiar, strained smile, but a genuine one. Daniel, we can talk, but this time I want to be honest. I don't want to be the one silently standing in the background anymore. Daniel nodded, his eyes a bit uncertain but sincere. I'm listening, Rachel. I held Jacob's hand, feeling his small arm squeezing around me. For the first time in a long while, I believed that this family, though cracked and weathered, could start again if we were all willing to face each other and truly listen. The morning light slipped through the tent flap, illuminating my face. I opened my eyes and saw Jacob still fast asleep, his breathing steady. Outside, I heard the sound of Daniel's car engine pulling up, earlier than I had expected. My heart pounded. Here it was, the unavoidable moment, facing reality, Carefully slipping out of the tent, I pulled on my jacket and stepped outside. Daniel stood there, his hands in his pockets, his face a mix of exhaustion and tension. He gave a faint smile when he saw me, a slightly awkward smile I hadn't seen in a long time. He said, his voice raspy. I got here earlier than planned. I nodded in reply. In that moment, I suddenly realized how many times before I had swallowed my true feelings just to keep the atmosphere light, to avoid tension. But not now. Daniel, I want to have a real conversation, I said, folding my arms tightly across my chest to steady myself. He paused, slightly startled. Yeah, of course. We walked slowly by the lakeshore, where the breeze skimmed across the water. I took deep breaths, gathering all my courage. Daniel, do you know how I've felt all these years? I asked softly. It's not just about you being gone for work. It's about how I've become invisible in my own marriage. He stopped walking, his brow furrowing. Rachel, I know I've neglected you and the kids. I kept thinking that working hard was for the family, but maybe I didn't see what I was slowly losing. I turned to him, my voice tightening. I forgot who I was, Daniel. Not just a wife, not just a mother, but Rachel, a woman who once had dreams, once had feelings, once wanted to be seen and loved. Daniel was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a deep sigh, his gaze dropping to the ground. I don't know how to fix that. I just know. I don't want to lose you. I looked at him, and inside me rose a swirl of complicated feelings. Affection, weariness, hope, fear. I wasn't sure if we could ever go back to what we once were, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to keep living quietly in the shadows. Daniel, I said slowly, I don't need promises or instant change. I just need you to listen. Really listen this time. He looked up at me and nodded. I'm listening, Rachel. I clenched my hands together, exhaling, feeling part of the weight lift from my chest. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be hard conversations, reopened wounds, cracks needing repair, but at least we had dared to begin. Jacob ran out of the tent, his hair messy, his eyes shining bright as he saw his parents standing together. He rushed over and threw his arms around Daniel. Dad! Daniel bent down, wrapping his arms around his son, his gaze meeting mine, filled with something gentle, perhaps gratitude, or regret, or hope. I wasn't sure. I only knew that in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I no longer felt alone. After the simple breakfast by the campfire, Daniel and Jacob went for a walk along the lakeshore, leaving me alone to pack up. I sat down, took a deep breath, and listened to the sound of the wind brushing through the tall grass. All the feelings inside me were still tangled like a ball of string. Part of me still anxious, part of me relieved that I had finally dared to speak the truth. In my heart, as I absent-mindedly folded the blanket, Jacob slipped back early. He sat down next to me, his deep brown eyes shining with the maturity beyond his years. Mom, Jacob said softly, are you sad? I froze slightly. I had been trying to hide my feelings for so many years, but it seemed my son saw more clearly than I thought. Yes, I'm a little sad, Jacob, I confessed, gently brushing his soft hair. But I'm okay. I'm learning not to endure everything alone anymore. Jacob stayed silent for a moment, then whispered, I heard you and Dad talking this morning. I know you're sad because Dad's gone a lot, but don't be afraid. I'm always here with you. That simple, heartfelt sentence left me speechless. I leaned down, hugging my son tightly, a tear slipping down onto Jacob's cheek. Thank you, Jacob, I whispered. Thank you for being my son. A moment later, Daniel returned, his eyes meeting the scene. He stood still for a while, then stepped closer, his voice gentle, slightly awkward. Rachel, I know I can't change everything in a day, but if you'll let me, I want to try. I want to be here more, listen more, and slow down enough to really see you, see the kids, see myself. I looked up at him, and a strange feeling stirred in my heart. Not absolute trust, but a small, fragile spark of hope. something that would need to be nurtured with patience. Daniel, I said, my voice soft but steady. I'm not expecting perfection. I simply want us to truly be there for each other with sincerity and openness. He nodded, his eyes reflecting determination. I promise. I gave a small, tired, but genuine smile. We still had so much to talk about, so many gaps to bridge, but at least we had reached the starting point. Daring to admit the hurt, daring to want healing, daring to step toward each other, even without knowing how long the road ahead would be. Jacob tugged on both mine and Daniel's hands, pulling us toward the lake. Mom, Dad, look, the sky is so beautiful today. He beamed, his face glowing in the morning light. I took that small hand, feeling something simple yet profoundly clear. No matter how many fears, no matter how many cracks in the heart, as long as there was genuine love between parents, children, and even within oneself, there would always be hope. The days after the camping trip passed like a strange, unfamiliar calm. I, Rachel, 40 years old, for the first time in many years, could clearly feel a small but real shift in the atmosphere of our family. Daniel came home from work but no longer dove straight into his laptop or endless phone calls like before. He sat down at the dinner table, asked Lily what she had learned at school that day, and listened as Jacob talked about basketball at school. On some evenings when I was tired after work, he prepared dinner himself. Clumsy, simple, but it made me smile without realizing it. We didn't magically become a perfect family overnight. There were still evenings when I curled up in doubt. Was this change real? Or would it fade away once the pace of life swept him away again? But in those moments, I remember Jacob's whispered words in the woods. I'm always here with you, Mom. And I felt warmth. One weekend afternoon, the whole family worked together to tidy up the garden, which had long been neglected. Lily ran around picking flowers. Jacob climbed up the tree to hang string lights. Daniel stood next to me, broom in hand, smiling softly. I can't remember the last time we did housework together. I looked at him, a smile crossing my face, a little sad but also relieved. I don't remember either, but at least we're starting again. Daniel nodded, his eyes gentle but tinged with guilt. Thank you for not letting go. That night, as I lay reading in the bedroom, Jacob gently knocked and came in. Mom, he said softly, were you happy today? I pulled him to sit next to me, wrapped an arm around his shoulders and whispered, I'm happy. Because I see that I'm not just Mom, but also Rachel, a woman who's learning to love herself and her family more fully. Jacob smiled, his eyes bright and glistening. I'll learn with you too, Mom. We didn't say anything more, just sat together listening to the soft patter of rain outside the window. A week later, as I was tidying up the old bookshelf, I stumbled upon letters Danielle had written to me many years ago, back when we were newly married. The youthful, dream-filled words reminded me of the man I had once loved, and also reminded me that both of us, over all these years, had lost parts of ourselves. That evening, I brought the letters to Daniel. He sat silently for a long time, then looked up, eyes slightly red. I've forgotten who I used to be too, Rachel. I placed my hand on his, giving it a gentle squeeze. Do you think we can find our way back? He smiled for the first time in so long, no longer busy, no longer regretful. Only sincerity remained. Let's try together. Life is never perfect, but each day is a new opportunity to learn, to heal, to rebuild something from the broken pieces. If you've ever had a moment where you looked at yourself and wondered, can I start over? I hope this little story has brought you a bit of warmth. Have you ever experienced a feeling of disconnection within your family or even with yourself? What do you think is the most important thing when it comes to mending the gaps that have formed? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I would truly love to hear your story.